Daniel Sports Central, we go over our next schedule preview this offseason, and it's going to be over the Tennessee Vols, one of the most memorable teams of the 2022 season. This team, we knew they were going to be good heading into the 2022 season, but this team turned out to be great. They were a true national contender in the 2022 season. They were in the college football playoff conversation for the majority of the season. Truly an outstanding season for Tennessee. But how will this team be in 2023? Will this team return to national contention in the 2023 season? Could they be even better in the 2023 season? We'll be talking about that here today. We'll be going over the players this team will be losing, who will be returning, and improving their schedule for the first time this offseason. Let's get started looking at a quick recap of 2022. Once again, nothing short of an outstanding season for Tennessee. They started the season 8-0. That included a win against Alabama, what was a thriller. And quite honestly, to this day, looking back at the 2022 season, that was far and away, I'd probably say, the most memorable game of the 2022, at least the regular season for me. I mean, that Tennessee-Alabama game was truly a classic when it comes to college football, back and forth the entire way. A field goal to win it for Tennessee, the storylines, everything. I mean, just an incredible game there. And I mean, if there's anything to take away from the 2022 season for Tennessee, yeah, it was an outstanding season, but that thriller against Alabama is something that I'm sure no Tennessee fan is ever going to forget. But you look at this season otherwise, beat Ball State to start things off, beat Pitt on the road in overtime. That was a close game there. Pitt coming off of their outstanding 2021 season. They were looking pretty good at that point, even though they weren't quite as good in 2022. They beat Akron the next week, beat Florida as well, which was a solid win there. So heading into the bye, this team was 4-0. And starting to be talked about a bit in the SEC. They come back after their bye, beat LSU 40-13. That's really when things, I mean, October was just a phenomenal month for Tennessee. This team was hot in October. They beat Alabama the next week 52-49, beat UT Martin, and beat Kentucky 44-6 to finish out October. I mean, this team in October was the best team in the country, no doubt about it. This team ranked at number 1 for multiple weeks there in October, and I think that was rightfully so. But then November came around. This team did lose to Georgia by a couple of touchdowns, beat Missouri 66-24, lost to South Carolina 63-38. That was a gut punch for Tennessee's chances of being in the college football playoff. Otherwise, they would have been in it. I mean, this team would have been in the college football playoff if they could have beaten South Carolina there. So in the end, that one hurts. And you also lost Hendon Hooker in that game. So that was just a tough night there in Columbia. But in the end, I mean, you beat Vanderbilt the next week, shut them out, and they beat Clemson 31-14 in the Orange Bowl. Took care of Clemson with Joe Milton as the starting quarterback. I mean, Tennessee finished out the season really strong, and that's super promising as well for the future. This team, it was not just Hendon Hooker. They had tremendous talent on both sides of the ball otherwise, not just Hendon Hooker. So that just proves, I mean, that Clemson win in the Orange Bowl really proves that. And yeah, truly an outstanding season for this team. 11-2 the final record in a season that will not soon be forgotten. But the roster preview going to next season, let's start looking at 2023. This team does lose the star quarterback Hendon Hooker, who just broke through in the 2022 season. 3,100 yards, 27 touchdowns, over 2 picks. Truly outstanding. We saw him really improve in the 2021 season. That's why this team was on definitely a watch list heading into 2022, was Hendon Hooker really came around in the 2021 season. So really, I mean, both the 21 and 22 seasons for Tennessee were breakthrough seasons for Hendon Hooker. I mean, at Virginia Tech, he was pretty mediocre, but once he got to Tennessee, he really excelled. You look at Joe Milton, this team does return him, and he was promising when he played. 970 yards, 10 touchdowns, no interceptions, and a 65% completion rate. So keep an eye on him going into next season. Joe Milton, the Michigan transfer quarterback. I mean, both Hendon Hooker and Joe Milton were brought in the same offseason from different schools. Hendon Hooker, once again, from Virginia Tech, Joe Milton from Michigan. Both quarterbacks were pretty average at their respective schools. And now you look at Hendon Hooker, the way that he finished out, and Joe Milton, where he looks like he's going. I mean, it's pretty impressive what Tennessee has done with these two quarterbacks. But you look at the backfield, this team is doing just fine. Jabari Small's coming back, over 840 yards this past season, 15 touchdowns. Jalen Wright, also over 800 yards and 10 touchdowns. So you got both of them coming back. And so the backfield looks great going into next season, I'd say. Receiving core, you do lose a couple of your key players, especially Jalen Hyatt, who really came around this past season, over 1,200 yards and 15 touchdowns. You're losing him. You're also losing Cedric Tillman, who kind of was dealing with injuries throughout the season. He was, I think, the top receiver for this team. If I'm right, in 2021, he was definitely one of them. He had over 1,000 yards and 12 touchdowns in 2021. But this team did have Bree McCoy step up, same with Ramel Keaton. So you got both of them coming back as we look forward to next season. Both of them combined for over 1,200 yards in the 2022 season. You also return your fifth receiver in Squirrel White. He also had an impact on this team, nearly 500 yards and 2 touchdowns. Receiving core, not concerned despite losing your top guy in Jalen Hyatt. Backfield looks good. Quarterback situation looks good. This offense looks pretty good going into next season. The offensive line does lose a couple there, but I do trust there's some good depth for Tennessee there, so I'm not too concerned. Defensively, not even losing that much. This team is losing 4 starters on defense, 1 on the D-line, 2 linebackers, and 1 in the secondary. I mean, this team is, they could be scary going into next season. I think this team is very much a team in contention, a team that could be in national contention again in 2023. It's just a matter of whether or not this team has that same energy without Hendon Hooker. But once again, the way that this team played against Clemson, I am pretty confident that this team does return to being a big contender nationally. And once again, you look at those stats, I mean, that's no mistake. Hendon Hooker, 70% completion rate, nothing short of outstanding in the 2022 season. Your transfer portal and recruiting now, this team has been very active in the transfer portal. You've lost a couple of players, but you've also brought in some key players. Gabe Judy Lally is coming in from BYU, defensive back. You got an offensive tackle coming in, and John Campbell Jr. from Miami. Keenan Pilley, linebacker, coming in also from BYU. You are losing Savion Herring, Juwan Mitchell, RJ Perry, Walker Merrill, and William Parker, all 2 different places. 3 of them are in the transfer portal. Perry is headed to South Florida, and Merrill is headed to Wake Forest. Otherwise, Carrick, offensive tackle, is coming in from Texas. So you do add some depth so far from the transfer portal to the offensive line, which is one of the main concerns, I'd say, going into next season. Omar Norman Lott, defensive lineman, is coming in from Arizona State. You got Dante Thornton, a receiver, coming in from Oregon, and McCallum Castles, tight end, coming in from UC Davis. Jimmy Holiday, Lyneth Whitehead, Justin Williams-Thomas, and Lynn J. Dixon are also headed out. 3 running backs there. None of those 3 really had significant parts on this team last season, but I'm not too concerned. Lynn J. Dixon has been relevant in the past, but not so much in the 2022 season. Recruiting-wise, this team is actually looking great as well. They are 8th nationally, 4th in the SEC. They got 12 4-stars and 12 3-stars coming in. So Tennessee, the future looks very bright for this team. I think there's a good chance, that this team is here to stay. Looking at 2022, how this team was last season, the returning production, the recruiting, things look really good for Tennessee going to next season. I think the future is very bright. I've got them at a 9 out of 10 on my future forecast meter. The only team that I've put at a 10 so far is Georgia, and honestly, it might just remain that way because Georgia is clearly the top power in college football right now. But Tennessee is a team that is definitely on the rise right now, and I'm pretty confident that they remain a big national contender for years to come. But that said, let's look at your schedule now going to next season. You start off the season against Virginia in a neutral location, then Austin Peay after that, Florida on the road to start off your conference slate. You got UTSA on the 23rd of September, South Carolina to finish out September at home there. Obviously, that's going to be a game where you definitely want to play well, considering that was the team that took you out of college football playoff contention last season. In October, you got Texas A&M after your bye at home, then Alabama on the road. Obviously, we know how last season's game went. That game is in Tuscaloosa this upcoming season, and then Kentucky on the road to finish out October. Then November, you got UConn at home, Missouri on the road, Georgia, big game there at home on the 18th, and then Vanderbilt to finish out the regular season, also at home. So that's it. Let's look at September now. You got Virginia in a neutral location to start off the season. That is in Nashville at Nissan Stadium. Should be an exciting game there. I do think Tennessee ends up winning it. I'm pretty confident saying that. I think Virginia's a team that is just in a messy situation right now. Last season, I felt like 2022 could have been a good season for Virginia. I could have seen that team potentially winning their division, getting up to 9 wins, but it just was not that way. Brennan Armstrong, that team just did not click, and in the end, just a poor season. In 2023, Just don't think it'll be too much better. So I think you take care of them. You beat Austin Peay then after that. Now, Florida's a game that's kind of questionable, though. Going on the road to Gainesville, I don't think Florida's going to be terribly good next season. I think they're still in a rebuild phase. But it's on the road in a tough place to play in the earlier part of the season. I think that could be a dangerous game there for Tennessee against a rival. So I'll say that's a yellow game, but I do want to favor Tennessee still there, but it could be a closer game. UTSA, easy win there. South Carolina at home. That'll be a big one there. I can guarantee you Neyland is going to be rocking for that game. South Carolina is the team that knocked Tennessee out of the playoff, pretty much out of playoff contention last season. They're going to want to win that game. That's definitely one to mark on your calendar. I think Tennessee wins it. Potentially. Well, I'm going to say that. I'm going to say I'm favoring them right now. We're still so far away from that game happening, but as of right now, we'll be favoring Tennessee with them being at home there. So ceiling 5-0 heading into October. I'm putting the floor at 4-1 just in case this team does lose. And if they were to lose a game, it definitely probably beat a Florida, maybe South Carolina, but I'd say if you're going to lose a game in your first 5, it's probably going to be the Florida. Now for October, you got Texas A&M, Alabama, and Kentucky. 3 big games here after your bye. Texas A&M, I do think I'll favor Tennessee there right now. It's a close game. Texas A&M is a team that very much disappointed in 2022, so we'll see if they can come back and have a decent season. I see it being close, but I'll favor Tennessee right now. That Alabama game, though, in Tuscaloosa, after what happened last season, I mean, just a thriller this past season, but I think I'll favor Alabama right now in that matchup with it being on the road. I think Tennessee is very much a team that could still, I mean, they got over the hump. They finally beat Alabama. They could beat them again in 2023, but on the road right now, I'll be favoring Alabama. And then Kentucky on the road, I'd say that's also a game where I favor Tennessee there. Kentucky, I don't expect to be terribly good in 2023, but still a game to keep your eye on, especially after a road trip to Tuscaloosa and what could be a brutal game there on the 21st. So on the 28th, I do want to favor Tennessee right now, but definitely could be a close one. So ceiling is 8-0, floor is 5-3 heading to November. Let's look at November here. You got UConn and Missouri, 2 easy wins there, I think. Missouri on the road could be one to, you want to take that game seriously. I mean, Missouri I don't think is going to be terribly good, but you still want to keep your eye on that one. Don't want to sleep on that one on the road. And then Georgia at home on the 18th. I actually think you got a better chance of beating Georgia this season than Alabama. You got Georgia at home, and we know when Neyland is rocking, it is brutal to play there. And in the end, I could see that potentially being Georgia's first loss in forever there. I think Georgia has got a good chance to run the table in 2023 once again. I mean, things set up perfectly for that. But that Tennessee game is by far Georgia's most dangerous game in the 2023 season. So I think Tennessee's got a chance to knock them off there, but I will be favoring Georgia right now just because, I mean, it's really tough to dethrone Georgia right now the way that their program is with recruiting and everything. So I will be favoring Georgia right now there, even though it's going to be close, I think. Then Vanderbilt, easy win to finish out the season. So I've got the ceiling at 12-0 for Tennessee. I think this team is capable of going undefeated. I think that's pretty unlikely. I do think this team takes a loss or 2 in the 2023 season. That doesn't knock them out of college football playoff contention, but I do think this team does take a loss or 2. But I'll still put the ceiling at 12-0. The floor is 8-4 just in case if this team doesn't click and disappoints a bit. I think 8-4 is the worst that this team could be in 2023. So really interesting season coming up here for Tennessee. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below on the Vols, and I appreciate you guys watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.